Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my 5 favorite books so far. So far as in the time I've been reading. And I've talked about some of these books before, but maybe not in this kind of personal context. And I also wanted to do this because I wanted to it's a kind of interior exercise for me to kind of figure out my taste. Anyway, but today I'll be specifically looking at fiction. There won't be any non-fiction or academic books in these lists, because fiction is only something I've been kind of seriously reading for, I don't know, I guess a year, maybe a bit longer than a year now. I've been actually seriously thinking about fiction as a form. And so I've got 2 honorable mentions before the top 5. And the first one is Calvino's If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. This book I kind of have to put as an honorable mention because although it was not my favorite to read from an enjoyment standpoint, it was probably the most important book in my reading journey of the last year and a little bit, because it was my first conscious book of, okay, I'm going to actually start reading fiction, and I'm going to kind of commit myself to reading fictional books. I had read, novels before then, like kind of classics like Frankenstein or Picture of Dorian Gray and stuff like that. But I had just kind of read them, and then I would go for a couple months without reading, and then I would kind of pick up another one. But now I have like a conscious thing where I have to always have a kind of novel on the go, or at least like short stories on the go or something like that, along with my academic readings. But so Calvino was very special to me. I think I might have already mentioned when I reviewed it, or at least when I kind of talked about it on this channel, that my dad got it for me. So I'll kind of skip that. But what I find it, for me most personally, why this book is so important, or why these series of excerpts are so important, I should say, is because it was my first kind of foray into postmodern experimentation with the fictional form. Calvino is so kind of radical in terms of like his kind of imagination, and through that I kind of basically hated this book. When I started off, I thought it was just kind of teasing me, and then as I kept going, and I also was reading other things by this point as I was getting through this one, you kind of can't deny that Calvino was a lover of reading and writing. And obviously that sounds kind of, obvious. But when you first start reading kind of experiments like Calvino or like William Burroughs, it gives the impression that they are making fun of the form, or that they are in a certain sense. But with this book, he makes fun of the form in a way which kind of conveys his incredible interest in the practices of reading and writing. And there are just so many kind of metafictional techniques within it, which was something that I had never ever kind of run into before. Like the classic reader trying to find the story that they are trying to read, and then getting distracted by other stories. It also kind of provided me with a certain sympathy for writers as a reader myself, as someone who hasn't, published anything. It kind of, in certain excerpts of this book, it portrays readers as these vampires who kind of are haunting the writer as he writes. because you always have to think about who is going to read your book and what's your book going to be used for when you are writing it. And I found that quite interesting, and I think it kind of provided me with lots of sincerity through my reading and sympathy. Okay, the next honorable mention is Hong Kong's The Vegetarian. Hong Kong will be making another appearance in this list, but this is just an honorable mention. This wonderful book was given to me by my partner, and I read it. I have very fond memories of this book, despite the kind of terrifying, as it says on the front, terrifying story that it portrays, because I kind of read it over a couple of days while I was I was having a holiday in Sydney with me and my partner, and I read it kind of on the beach. And although it is a kind of horrific story, which kind of shows the very kind of bodily nature of misogyny in the South Korean context, and how that can kind of manifest in which insanity is a viable way out of your kind of bodily constraint, or your womanly bodily constraint. I found it very beautiful to read. Like, I found it quite easy to read. And, just me personally, just the setting I was in when I was reading it was really lovely. But yeah, I mean, I'm quite interested in kind of how our kind of ontology, or our way of being, and how we figure ourselves to our body, and that is something that that alongside social kind of constraints, and that's what kind of this book is trying to attend to and portray, how kind of these social constraints, which are centered and produce the body itself, can kind of manifest in a way in which the only way to resist is by destroying one's own body, or kind of resisting against one's own body. That's something I research and write about a lot. So yeah, I thought it was really good. I would be interested in reading it again, since I really ripped through this one. So okay, now we're on to the official list. This is not in order, I should say. Sense of ordering is I feel like it's a little kind of pedantic, but the first one is my most recent read, which I talked about a little bit in the last video, Secret History Donna Tartt. I think, why did I enjoy this? I think I enjoyed this book so much because it kind of got me back into reading, into a certain type of reading. I kind of, before this one, I had been kind of trying to expand my taste by reading lots of challenging books like William Burroughs or Clarice Lispector. Challenging for me anyway, which I loved. I loved doing that. But when I started reading this book, I was like, oh, this is why. It kind of brought me back to like when I was a teenager, a kid. I'm 20, so not that long ago. But when I was maybe like 14, 15, 16, the books I liked reading then were basically these kind of morally questionable adolescent dramas with, some sort of a little bit of romance, lots of kind of mystery. And I mean, this is just like, I feel like the best version of that, alongside some extremely like proficient foreshadowing and kind of philosophical and classical themes, which are so smartly portrayed. You could enjoy this book at like a kind of surface level, where it's just a really engaging story and the characters are so well described and you'll just love it. Or you could enjoy this book at a much deeper level and actually like look at what the characters represent and kind of and look at the clues that Tart lays, pages and pages and pages before they come to hand. You could enjoy this book any which way. I really think it's like such a prolific achievement, this one. Like, it is just amazingly easy to read, such a page turner, and that is something I'd kind of gotten away from, and it kind of got me back into that type of reading where you just keep going and going, you can't put the book down. And yeah, Secret History, really good one. Okay, next one we've got is the other Hong Kong, my preferred Hong Kong that I've read, which is Greek Lessons. This is my partner's copy. This was also, alongside the Calvino, was one of the first books that I read when I consciously started trying to read, and it was one of the first books that I actually wrote a kind of review for after I'd read it, specifically for my partner. And this one I enjoyed so much because it kind of spoke to something that I had been feeling throughout all of my work up until then. At that point, I was in my second year of university, and I do very kind of language-heavy stuff. I do sociology and gender studies, and especially in gender studies, you kind of sometimes run into the kind of various failures of language to properly portray our sensations or our feelings, because you kind of learn through studying gender or studying race that language is not a neutral thing. Language is a very political thing, and Hong Kong's Greek Lessons kind of attends to this kind of horrible feeling where basically the main character, a woman, basically has had such various horrific events happen to her, and that trauma she can't actually articulate. And through that kind of confusion and the failure of language, she cannot speak. So she basically can't speak, and through that, to try and get herself to speak again, she tries to learn ancient Greek. Another kind of callback to Secret History, I guess. And anyway, through trying to learn ancient Greek, which is kind of trying to kind of cure herself of this confusion by going back to a language which is dead, a dead language as ancient Greek is, which isn't used anymore. I thought that was quite interesting that they chose ancient Greek as the language. Since maybe it can attend to feelings that our contemporary languages can't, something like that. And anyway, and then her Greek teacher, he is losing his sight very rapidly. And there's just these amazing, because it's a very kind of like, I guess, experimental interior novel. And you kind of go through each of these characters' memories and emotions, all described amazing. And I remember that there was this one line about the man who was slowly losing his eyesight, where his dreams were the only place where he could see color. And so he would wake up to this kind of sea of darkness. And yeah, some of the imagery, there's lots of like imagery around snow, because they're both losing their sensations of this kind of dulling coldness, or this kind of blanket of darkness. Very interesting. But yeah, my main area of focus with this book was like how it attended to notions of language failing us in certain ways, and failing certain people too. Who does language not work for? Anyway, that is Greek Lessons. Oh, and I've noticed that all my next books all have a blue color scheme, so maybe that says something about me aesthetically. I don't know. Yeah, I preferred it to The Vegetarian. I'm very interested in reading all of her other stuff. I think she's incredible. Okay, next one is Joyce's Dubliners. I'm reading Portrait of the Artist now, and so far I really like it, and I'll talk about it more, but I began reading it because of Dubliners. My grandmother is a massive Joyce fan, and whenever you look up where to start with Joyce, let's just say that people are not recommending Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake. They're probably, they just say read them in order. So I started with Dubliners. And I think the reason I enjoyed this one so much was because, Joyce has such a kind of like, Joyce is so infamous for being kind of having this dream made up language, or obviously in Finnegan's Wake, and to a lesser extent Ulysses. But he's regarded as a pretty hard guy to read. And Dubliners isn't really, but still I kind of had that kind of anxiety, right? And then I was reading it, and then I kind of was reading the stories, and I was like, I get this. Like, I get what he's trying to say. He's trying to kind of capture this kind of melancholy, this cynicism, and this kind of depressive bleakness of Dublin as he saw it. And it's also, I'm now even understanding Dubliners more through Portrait of the Artist, where you kind of see how a kid who is a little transgressive and a little too artistic is kind of being like socialized in a way in which his kind of dreams and his, for lack of a better word, dreams are being kind of crushed by various people, adults and his peers alike. And anyway, I mean, you can even like look at the color. Look at the cover. Sorry, it's a very kind of depressing image of Dublin. And yeah, I thought that was really good. Just how he had so many different stories of kind of the same thing, and it all kind of came together as a cohesive picture. And I should say that I don't think this is like it's kind of more complex than just being a negative image of Dublin. There are themes of colonization and poverty and stuff, where people from the effect of oppression have kind of come to be stuck in their ways, or they have come to be the living dead, as the last story is called, The Dead, where they kind of cling to religion as a way to kind of help themselves, and are kind of wary of any things against the norm. And and in my, in where I live, I can see similar things as well. Okay. The second to last book is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. This was a very hard book to read. And I dropped it twice. Maybe that's why I liked it so much, because it actually was quite hard, and I dropped it twice. And I first dropped it because I couldn't really log into what was happening. It's very stream of consciousness, as Woolf is known for, and it's very kind of poetic and fluid. And I couldn't really grasp onto it. It was kind of, slipped through my fingers. And then I picked it up again, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to put pressure on myself. I'm just going to read it as if I was looking at a painting. View it as if it is a portrait. And so I would kind of read it a little bit, and I would just let it kind of wash over me, and I wouldn't try to latch onto every word. I would just read it and move on if I didn't understand. And that's when it started clicking, and that's when I kind of found myself falling in love with the descriptions of motherhood that this basically deals with, and also with the familial setting, and also with the kind of moving of time, and with memory, and with trauma, especially surrounding World War II, which this is also, as a modernist work, is also dealing with. And so I think it's, one of my favorite books I've ever read, because it kind of taught me how to kind of read experimental stream of consciousness books in a way that is kind of enjoyable, where I wouldn't put pressure on myself to read 20, 30, 40 pages a day like I could with The Secret History, let's say. I would just let it wash over me, and I'd read 10 pages or even 5 pages. And, you should just kind of receive it like a gift and look at it as if it's a portrait. And yeah, I mean, I think Joyce and Woolf are just able to capture youth really, really well, as I've seen so far. Like these kind of, certain youth, I should say, not all youth, maybe more like me youth, of a certain like affluence, and wealth, but the kind of insecurity and the ignorance, but also the kind of sincerity of youth. They're both able to capture that extremely well, I think. And that, youthful sincerity alongside the kind of more melancholic and knowledgeable of the old. They kind of place those next to each other in a very, very beautiful way. Okay. And one that kind of I feel like is in the same conversation is, I would say, maybe the greatest piece of literature I've ever read, I would say. Like the greatest accomplishment of a writer I've ever seen. And that is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I like this book. I like this copy especially. My brother gave it to me. And this book was really amazing to me because I didn't know anything about Toni Morrison, and my brother gave it to me. Didn't think anything of it. Thought I would read the first couple pages to see if I liked it. I read the first couple pages, couldn't understand it at all. Morrison uses, especially in this book, I've only read this one from her, but it's a very, I would say, kind of lyrical, poetic prose, and it's hard to, once you've got used to it, it's very good, but if you just go into it cold, it's quite hard. And so, but then I read the first passage again, and I realized what it was depicting, and then it kind of clicks. And anyway, I don't want to kind of spoil this one at all. I think everyone should read this book. It just deals with the kind of the different psychological effects of slavery. It's in a context of post-slavery, but not so far removed from slavery, where kind of it is still like a trauma by generation. It's more close than that. And, Morrison just kind of explores that setting so well, and the different kind of psychological manifestations of that through her characters. And while also kind of drawing upon, biblical and Homer, classic literature canon to kind of portray this just magnificent story. It's a very complex story of kind of finding who you are and finding your name beyond, but also through the kind of your circumstances. I still don't think I fully understand it yet. I've only read it once. But what I can understand is that it is the greatest literature accomplishment I've read. And yeah, with that, these are the books, and yeah, that was the video.